Welcome to this edition of Business Supes, where we talk to successful business owners, learn a little bit about them, their business, and of course, their business superpower. Today, I'm joined by Shea Fite from Shea Fite Realtors. Shea, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate this. Yeah, this is pretty cool.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we're going to have a little fun here. So, why don't we start off? Just have you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about the business. What's your origin story?
Okay, so everybody has an origin story, and mine was pretty rough, and I think that's probably always. I guess everybody has a rough origin story that might be interesting to talk about, but um, I started because I was working with an organization for 18 years, and I kind of come to a place where I was a middle manager at a telephone company and had, I think 12 or 14 people at the end of it working for me. And we sold that entity, or the owner of that company sold that entity for several million dollars.
Mhm.
And then I was transitioned into a larger um Fortune 500 company. If I mentioned their name, most of America would know them.
Yeah.
And um and because this was a small company with only 75 employees that was local to Tulsa, Oklahoma, when that transition took place, I went into a culture that I was a complete fish out of water in.
Mm.
Um, I did not possess skills that you have to have in a Fortune 500 company to stay hired or to stay employed. I
Mm.
was not political, and I didn't see my role as being as a large portion of my role doing the necessary political maneuvers to stay a leader in that company. But because of my
Mhm.
title in my old company, I was jettisoned into a role in that new company that didn't really match, and I hated it. And so for that whole season, it was kind of a transitionary season, and then they and me decided this isn't a fit, and then I was jettisoned into finding a new role. Okay, so after 18 years of uninterrupted success in business, including watching that $55 million transaction take place and being a big part of that, um, I um, um, I was lost. And
Mhm.
so for about the next 18 months, I had three roles in IT that were 6 months long. So just understand, 18 years of uninterrupted service to 18 months and three jobs. And then
Wow.
I had an like what I would call an existential breakdown. I didn't go admit myself to the hospital like some people do. I didn't dive headlong into addictions like some people do,
Mhm.
but it was a crisis of mind, body, and soul. And and then I can't leave faith out of this because I was asking the Lord the whole time, what do you have for me? What is coming next? And it just was felt very silent and cold. Is
Mm.
because I needed to mature. And um so um I went and met with a um a, co- a referral to do to get a job, a job. And at the same time, I had procured my real estate license to get another job. And so there's a fancy commercial real estate brokerage here in town that sells a investment um, um, kind of an investment vehicle called a triple net lease. Those are actually
Mhm.
transacted as an investment, not just as like land or
Right.
commercial buildings, etc. And I'd heard that those guys in this specific company were making about 300K a year selling
Mm.
these triple net leases, and that money was attractive to me. And so again, being about 42, 43, I entered into that job process. I got all the way down to the end. I think we had 5 interviews with that company, various different managers, and they decided, we don't think so, Shea. And when I look back, I know why it was because in that environment, they needed you to grind. They needed you to make 60 to 100 calls a day, get 10 leads, chase them down, make 2 deals. And,
Wow.
that sales funnel I started out with 20 years ago. And as a 42, 43-year-old guy, they could take a 25-year-old guy fresh out of college and raise him up into exactly what they wanted him to be. But I was kind of an old horse at that point, and I already kind of knew how I was going to do things,
Mhm.
right? Right. And so at the end of the day, that didn't work, and I was jettisoned again. But that role required a real estate license. Okay. So I got that real estate license in 3 weeks pursuing that role. So there I was, devastated. I remember crawling under my desk in my office and literally crying
Mm.
for 2 hours. But I had this real estate license in my hand. And then this dear friend reaches out to me and says, "Hey, I have a friend who wants to meet you." And so I went and sat down with this business person, and she was going to do a Christian movie. Okay. And I love the Lord, but I don't really watch Christian movies. It's just like they're
Right.
always like kind of B movies to me. So I go and
Right.
I sit with her, and she goes, "Hey, I hear you need work." And I said, "Yeah, absolutely. My family needs. I've got 3 kids, at the time 9 and 11 and 13." And she
Mm.
goes, "Well, here's what I want you to do. We're going to do this movie, and I want you to call people and ask them for money." And I'm like, "Oh, so this is kind of like sales." She's like, "Yeah, but we call it fundraising." And I'm like, "So you want me to sit at a desk in a cubicle and make 50 to 100 calls a day and grind that out and raise money for you?" She said, "Yes, that would be amazing. You need this. I need this. Let's do it." She goes, "What do you think?" And I said, "Honestly, that sounds awful." And she was shocked, and she looked at me and she said, "Well, what do you do? What do you want to do?" And I said, "The biggest fake it, make it I've ever said in my life." And it's because I grew up in Western Oklahoma in the trades, and I built houses with my dad, and we did
Mm.
floor covering and just, hard work, working man's work.
Right.
And I said, "I help prepare people's homes for sale, including light construction, and I sell them." And at that
Mm.
point, I hadn't sold one house. And she looked at me wide eyed and she goes, "Shea, that is brilliant. No one else is doing that." And that one little word of encouragement was the start of what I do now. And so
Wow.
that's how it worked. And that's, several hundred houses ago. And we do all that. We subcontract to paint walls, to clean up terrible stuff, and to make houses beautiful again. And what we do is we'll go in, and instead of me flipping the house with my capital, which a lot of business people want to hear, like, how do I flip a house? I will come alongside you, Eric, and say, "Hey, you have this home. Let's walk through it. Okay, if you do nothing, it's worth this. But if you do a few of these things, it's worth this. But if you do all of these things, it's worth this." And then we find that nexus point, and we bring your house to market, and it's absolutely wonderful. They sell, my houses, whenever we do the whole house remodel, sells 97% of sale price in a couple of weeks in almost
Mm.
any market. Now, this market's new and different, and we could talk about that later.
Right. So what
They,
is it about owning your own business that really appeals to you versus, the corporate grind?
well, so for me personally, I think every business person should consider whether they have a high degree of decorum and political strategy if they're entering a large company, or if they're more like me, who tends to be super honest and straightforward and speak your mind. And if you're a speak your mind person, I think for me, this offered a level of safety that I didn't get in a role in a larger organization. So I felt the freedom of independence,
Hmm.
of making my own way. And it was scary at first, no revenue. I left that meeting and I picked up a hammer, and I remember being out on a friend's roof working for $15 an hour,
Hmm.
and 18 months ago was making $140,000 a year compensation package. And
Wow.
so yeah, humbling to go this route. But for me, working out my own way was highly fulfilling.
Yeah. Well, and you talked about, that need to mature. And I think that's so important because you talk about, your faith and God, what do you have in place here for me? But if it was time, it would happen, right? So I liked what you were talking about as far as that growth pattern that you had to go through. So what are some of the things that you did to grow and to mature into who you are now so you could build the business that you have?
Well, the first thing I did was I didn't quit. Okay. And so I'll describe it like this. When you're put in a position where you have to, you tend to rise to that occasion. Okay.
Hmm.
And so the biggest thing that I needed to mature in from a business standpoint, not a character standpoint, but a business standpoint, was how to manage cash flow. Because when you enter into a larger organization, they will put you in a role that's very specific. And I was always a revenue producer. I was always
Hmm.
making phone calls, creating relationships, and I'd really honed the ability to close a sale or to lead a person into a decision. But what I didn't know was how to manage expenses, how to manage taxes, how to manage um, even if I was, how to know that I was making a profit, you know.
Hmm.
And so I went through a whole process of getting my A double Kirby line kicked in order to understand, okay, at the end of the year, I have enough to pay my taxes, I have enough to
Hmm.
take care of my family, and so on and so forth. And so that was probably a biggest maturity in that. And when I look back, and if you do much reading at all, most small businesses fail on cash flow.
Yep.
They have a good idea, they have a good product, but they don't pace themselves appropriately. And serendipitously, like, I mean, I could tell you that story, but it is absolutely brutal. But, you know, 3 years in, we're starting to make money, but we don't have anything. And that's
Hmm.
because you're just burning, you're spending money at the wrong time. So it's not just what you make that matters, it's what you make in time that matters. And
Right.
so yeah, so I would just say learning how to manage cash flow was absolutely huge.
Yeah. We say revenue is vanity and profit is sanity. So yeah, that's
Yes,
absolutely
there you
true.
go.
Um,
Yeah, because my
so
business experience, this is very interesting because my business experience prior to that was revenue solves all. But
yeah.
revenue doesn't solve all if your revenue is going up, but your expenses are going up commensurate to revenue. So
Yep.
you have to figure out that balance for yourself. In my role, the way I've done it is I manage the business. My wife actually manages our personal finances so that I don't
Mm.
get overwhelmed with all the details. But yeah.
Teamwork makes the dream work, right? So
Hmm.
what would you say, because obviously there are a lot of different options out there as it relates to realtors. So what would you say makes Shea Fite Realtors different from everybody else out there?
Well, of course, the construction component makes a huge difference. And thank you for asking because it's not how we're the same, it's how we're different that really makes a difference, in terms of getting
Right.
clients, right? And so the construction aspect is fascinating. Most agents don't know how a house is built. So most agents don't know how a house is built. And that's a tragedy. It's a tragedy because that's what we sell, the inner workings of what we sell. So it's super helpful on the buying side if I'm representing you to know, okay, that's what this means. That's where this is going to cost you money later. This is how much it costs to paint these walls. This is how
Hmm.
much resurfacing these floors matter. So, buyers are trying to make those decisions, especially in this market where things are so expensive. Well, the other superpower, and I'll just say, what is your business superpower? Because I think you're going to get there eventually, is negotiating, is the ability to negotiate. So, a quick little story, and I know we're getting close on time. A client right now is from Pakistan. Sweet, wonderful family, right?
Hmm.
Um, and very professional. He has a professional role at a local university here in Tulsa. And I was sitting next to him the other day, and I said, "Hey, sir, I bet you think Americans are terrible at negotiating." And he laughed out loud. He is like, absolutely, like, what in the world? What is wrong with you people? And it's
Hmm.
because if you're in his home country, he negotiates for a tomato. He negotiates
Hmm.
he goes to the market for all their clothes. He negotiates all the way up for a car, for a motorcycle, for a bicycle. Everything is negotiable. And so I'd recognized that, based on some travels earlier in my life, and
Right.
realize that as things have gone in America, we really only negotiate for one thing now, and it's a house. Everything else,
Hmm.
even cars, are no longer
Well, yeah.
negotiable, right? And so I was telling him that most Americans don't have negotiating skills, but one of the things that I can do is I can reflect your negotiating skills. So we will
Mm.
negotiate together. And so we jumped in, and we've got him under contract on a beautiful little house, and he didn't pay a penny too much for it, you know. And
That's
so
awesome.
that's how this goes. But most people aren't business minded, aren't shrewd
Hmm.
negotiators. Now, my business friends are, because they realize things are negotiable that aren't really negotiable. So
Right.
having a high level of relational connectivity where you don't offend people in your negotiation, but you're also true to your values and you're true to your boundaries, it's a wonderful thing. And I am suspicious that many of my agent colleagues do not possess those skills and don't understand actually how they operate. And I know this because I win a lot.
Yeah.
I don't want to be,
Well,
you know what I
that's
mean?
a good
You
telltale
know,
sign. Yep.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So there's my business superpower. I think you were going to get to that, but
Yep.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So last question here. So what nugget of advice do you have for other business owners?
It's going to go back to step one. You got to learn how to manage cash flow. You have to learn how to look at or find a way. You have to find a method or a way to understand how much money is coming in, and we call that revenue. And then how much money is going out, we call that expenses. And then what is left over in between. and
Hopefully,
then
right?
and then what do you owe the government? And if you can figure out a method of that madness, of some
Hmm.
method of that madness, you can really enjoy being a small business person. But if you don't come to that, you're going to be miserable in small business and may ring the bell, may check out and go on work for somebody else, because that's all wrapped up in a W-2. So, and then probably a sister to that is once you learn how to manage cash flow, to to teach your significant other, if you are as a small business owner and you are married, um, to understand the difference between revenue and expenses.
It's
Because I know there's massive conflict that we had in my marriage. Wait, honey, we have a $15,000 in commissions this month. What do you mean that we can only spend 7,500 of it? That kind of thing.
right.
So those are my two gigs, man. I've learned a lot. There's a lot more I could talk about, but those are some of the big ones and the fun ones.
Yeah. Well, Shay, that was great advice. Thanks so much for spending some time with us, sharing your business power and telling us a little bit about your story. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you for spending time with me and hope to hang out with you soon. Thanks, Eric.